We're ready. Okay. Hello, good evening. Nice to meet you, everybody, and thank you for coming. So my name is Kar-Yee, and this is Stewart, and together we are Karst Organics. So we are green bean coffee importers that source coffee direct from East Timor or Timor-Leste. So we spend 6 months of the year based out at origin, living and working together with our partner farmers in the mountains of Letifoho. So we work with them and we provide them with support and materials in order to be able to process the coffee, and then we will import that into the UK directly and bring it to the lovely people like you guys so you can drink Timorese coffee. So just a little intro into the...
Yeah, do you want to give a bit of a background?
You can start.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure if you all know exactly where Timor-Leste is geographically located, but yeah, there it is. So it's pretty much as south of Southeast Asia as you can get. Indonesia directly to the west, and Papua New Guinea up here to the east, and then actually the nearest city here is Darwin. So very, very, very small country, population of about 1.3 million people. Geographically, much smaller than England. So there's a lot of land, small population. Language, very complicated due to its colonial history. So Timor was first colonized by Portugal about 450 years ago, and was handed independence in 1975. And 9 days after independence, Indonesia came in and recolonized, which was incredibly unlucky. But unfortunately, at that time, what had happened is Kissinger had flown into Indonesia and had basically convinced Australia and Indonesia that Timor-Leste was a communist state, and America financed an Indonesian invasion. What then transpired was a fight for independence, which lasted until 1999 with UN intervention, and then Timor-Leste regained independence in 2002. So it has 2 Independence Days. And I put language up there because it means what you have here is an incredibly complex situation politically, with a lot of 450 years cultural influence from Portugal, 25 years cultural influence from Indonesia, influence from Australia. Now there's a lot of influence from China, and languages spoken at the moment, we have primarily Teton, which is the indigenous language. If you were born post 75, you'll find that people will speak Portuguese as well. Or pre 75, post 75, people will speak Bahasa as well, which is the language of Indonesia. So it's really now just starting to find its feet as Teton as the primary language in Timor. Resources, main export is oil and gas, with coffee as the second biggest export there. Lack of infrastructure, it is Southeast Asia's poorest nation state, and the investment that is coming in is all built up in the city. It's not really working its way out into the districts, into the coffee producing areas as yet. We have most people living below the national poverty line. So just to give you some idea of how, in coffee, I'm not quite sure how we measure an economy. We don't know either, to be honest with you, for Timor. So our measurement is how many of the people that we work with are employed. Out of the 104 farmers that we work with, 2 have a job. One of them works for us, one of them is a teacher in the local community. All the rest of our farmers rely on coffee as their sole source of income for the entire year, which gives them approximately a 10-week window to harvest and sell their coffee, and that money will last them for the entire year, along with maybe some other smaller crops that they might have. If you're lucky enough to have a job in the city, your national minimum average salary will be about $115 per month, which is about £100 per month. So yeah, to give you some idea. But the problem is high unemployment, with a want for migration. So currently we have 30,000 Timorese living and working in the UK who moved here off the back of a Portuguese passport. We're very proud of that fact. Unfortunately, since we've left the European Union, it's made it more difficult for Timorese to come here, which is an incredible shame, because the Timorese that are here working incredibly hard and contributing to our economy. And that's just a little bit about the country itself. So, Kar-Yee, maybe we can focus in on a bit more on the coffee sector itself.
So in Timor, there are 5 main districts that produce coffee. So you can see highlighted here, you've got Likisa, Bobanaro, Ainaro, Aileu, and Emera, which is the district in which we source our coffee from. So within that area, you're talking around 120,000 people, of which there's a high reliance on coffee production for their income. And as Stewart said, it's only a very short period of time in which they have to be able to make that income. So the normal harvest in Timor-Leste will begin in probably late May, June. June. And then it will run until probably maximum, you're talking in a good climate, it would be expected to run until around August, September time, depending on the altitude. So we work with farmer groups who are based at different altitudes. So our lowest altitude is working at 1,450 meters above sea level, and then we go all the way up to nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. So the varietals in Timor are typically Typica and Hybrido de Timor. So a Hybrido de Timor is actually a natural hybrid cross between Arabica and Robusta coffee. So it's a very robust coffee in terms of robust against climate and robust against kind of coffee diseases and pests, but has the unique taste and sweetness of what an Arabica coffee would be.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on varietal? So Matt, what are some of the other varietals that you might have with the coffees that you have at the moment? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
A lot of them are just down to digits.
Okay. So Robusta is it's a much smaller coffee bean. It's got a lot more caffeine in it, and that clearly it's a cheaper coffee, and I think you'll find a lot of that in instant coffee. We're starting to move into specialty Robusta as well. At the moment, the coffee that we have, larger seed, and it's grown at higher altitude, less caffeine, and probably a more refined taste with that.
So the Hybrido de Timor has actually originated in Timor, of course, and with this particular varietal, what the coffee industry is doing now is that they have taken this hybrid in particular to then use as research and kind of genetically modifying different new varieties of coffee in order to be able to develop more diverse coffees, or coffees that are climate resistant or have more resilience. So you will hear things like Timor, because it's a cross of Timor, Hybrido de Timor, with a different varietal of coffee bean. So there's Timor, Sachimor, the SL28s and things like that. Then they're all kind of a engineered cross with a Hybrido de Timor base.
And I suppose why this part's relevant here, it's non-volcanic soil. Indonesia is very much volcanic soil, and Indonesian coffee is delicious, and I'm a big fan of Indonesian coffee, but it is volcanic, and that means that the cup that you'll get, the flavour profile, is very distinct from Timor-Leste. And I suppose one of the big things that we found when we set up the business is that most people thought that Timorese coffee would be very similar to Indonesian coffee, but is in fact nuanced enough to have a different cup profile, which puts Timor in a strong position as being its own origin. hopefully this will be as informal as we can make it. So do pitch in with any questions that you may have. Yeah, please at any time. All right, let's have a little look at. Okay, do you want to pump on to the next slide? So I used to work on an education project with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also with the Timorese military. And I think just keep in the back of your minds whilst we're talking about Timor, particularly with regards to sustainability, the Timorese are 98% Catholic. But when the Portuguese came, what they did, and I'm very proud of them for doing it, they took on board Catholicism, but they said, well, yeah, we'll take Catholicism, but we're going to blend it with our traditional animist beliefs. And we feel that's really quite important to understand the context of Timor, that there's this inherent respect for Mother Nature and the land and earth. And with regards to organic coffee and how they interact with the land, it makes it quite a special origin. So when I worked with the Timorese military on an educational project, this little guy was about 50 meters from my office. He was rescued by Steve Irwin, found in the back of a household in Dili, the capital city. It was outgrowing its pen, and they transferred her, actually, as you can tell, as a mascot for the Timorese military. And the crocodile is particularly important because the Timorese origin story for the country, much like the Aboriginals, they believe that their land was born off the back of a crocodile, and they won't cull the crocodile population. So there's quite a big saltwater population of crocodiles in Timor, which they view as their ancestors. This is when we used to live by the coast. We lived around here. As you can see, it bears kind of an eerie resemblance to a crocodile here. And the whole island is like that. And I suppose we think of Father Christmas and it's something that they'll grow out of. No, the Timorese, culturally, this is their belief. And I suppose remember that as we talk about coffee and that connection to the land. So we're here to, well, really, one of the things we wanted to talk about here was sustainability this evening. And there are so many definitions of what sustainability is, and I don't have the right definition, and I don't know what the right definition is, but when it came to setting up the business and we thought of sustainability, it really just meant us thinking and considering about the planet, our environment, about people who are on that planet, and also about the profit with regards to coffee. So those three pillars: environment, social and economic. Does anyone have any thoughts on a definition of sustainability that might apply here in the UK? Because my definition, or our definition, very much applies to our work in Timor. I don't know if you concur with that, or if you think there's another element you would add to that.
Even if it's different, we agree this one with planet, people and
Yeah.
Yeah, you concur.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, so when we think of our coffee and the work that we do, it's always to try and work with like Matt and Roger and say, listen, by you supporting us, we hope that we can support in these three areas here in Timor. We only know Timor-Leste, so there are other far more well-established origins globally, and I'm sure everybody is doing great work there, but we can't make comparisons because we haven't been. So the first thing we wanted to talk about with our work is like the environment and the planet and what we think makes Timor special. This is another origin. This is actually Brazil. And as you can see, this is not how all coffee is farmed in Brazil. Certainly not. There's certainly some shade-grown coffee in Brazil, agroforestry in Brazil, but this is coffee, monocrop coffee in Brazil. And I'm just wondering on your thoughts on what might make this different, say from a shade-grown agroforestry point of view. Is there anything that would immediately stand out and you think, oh, why is this a good thing? Why is this not a bad thing?
If you've not got problems with essentially water and that, like Do they have enough rainfall?
Do you know what? I would assume in the wet season, perhaps they will. Yeah,
There's potential lack of biodiversity there.
I think it's probably a key thing is with a monocrop, a lack of biodiversity, and I think that's the thing that we feel that Timor has is biodiversity.
Guess it can't be picked by hand.
That's a good point.
No straight lines.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Clearly, yeah. This would require a machine to go in and to shake the tree. Which again, I'm not saying is a bad thing, because that's what happens. That's what happens with development. But it is different from how we work in Timor. And as you can see, it's so vast that how could you do it any other way? Timor's a little bit different. If we just go forward a slide, when we look at the environment that we work in, all our coffee is shade grown. These are all our pictures, by the way. That's the only one I've robbed, is that last slide. But this is Christ-Uruguay, an area that we work in. It's the coffee here, and what we have here are the Icacao and Isantuku trees, which offer this canopy that we have here for where our coffee is grown. Now, instantly, when you can see the sun up there, this is acting as shade for what we believe to be slower maturation of the cherries. Certainly, I don't get burnt quite as much as I would if I was, in the last slide. One of the things that we always discuss is why we don't have organic certification, or why when we'll talk about that later, but why we don't need to use pest control and fertilizers. And the number one reason for that is because this canopy, we have a lot of birds there, big wildlife population. They're taking care of all the little creepy crawlies on the ground naturally, which helps a lot. The other thing that we have here are these big shade trees, which have these nodules on the bottom here, which are giving nitrogen to our coffee trees, which is really the key thing that all life needs to grow. So from an environmental perspective, this is the key thing I think Timor has, is this shade, and lots of other origins do as well, Mexico and Brazil and African origins as well. But Timor, this is all like this, all shade grown. Pop into there. The next thing that we have that Timor does naturally, this was a buzzword I've seen a lot in the last couple of years, agroforestry. If you were to say to our partner farmers, "Oh, do you know what agroforestry is?" They would probably say, "Oh, no, I don't. But have you seen my coffee that's growing alongside my avocados, that's growing alongside my mangoes?" Timor's been doing this naturally for centuries. So obviously that's increased biodiversity, acts as a food staple for our partner farmers, and also is a secondary source of income. Here, I don't know, do you know what this plant is here? Any idea?
Is that one which is like blowing once in 4 years or something like that?
Is it once in 4 years? Maybe
not
you're right.
This one. There is another flower that looks like that grows only every 4 years or something. But this is konjac. So it's
It's a lot bigger, isn't it? Almost like.
yeah. That's that one,
Okay.
the big flower that opens up every like 10 years and
It's I just read like a week ago, it was like 40 years.
Wow.
Once in 40 years is blowing up, or is kind of miracle if you see it once. in your
Yeah.
life.
Do they have one in Kew Gardens?
Yeah,
That
it smells
it's
quite
quite pungent, I think.
like rotten eggs, right?
Yeah. I'll look out for that. This is konjac. We can make noodles from this. Actually, it's called devil's tongue as well. Have you heard of this before?
Yeah.
Where did you?
The noodles.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whereabouts? In
Tesco's.
seriously? Cool. Do you know that we didn't have pasta when I was a kid until about 1991, and now we can get konjac noodles in Tesco's. Also, they do make sponges out of this, right? So one of the things we're looking at is also diversify crops, because this per kilo you can get a good price for this. So my background's education. Kar-Yee's background is business. It's important to remember when we'll talk later about how we've improved the coffee quality. All we've done is help with organisation to make things a little bit better. We've not reinvented the wheel with that, and it's just trying to give additional advice on how they can potentially diversify their crops. With the forest itself, yeah, all materials barring the roof for tin will be wood taken from the forest, and also to cook with. And if you're sick, there's not an instant access to a medical centre in where we are, so there's still a culture of going to the woods to find your medicine. And actually, Roger, did you studied that in Papua New Guinea? Was that part of your studies, natural medicine? Yeah. I'd love to have you come and visit us and make comparisons between Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste. And yeah, the one thing, we do not have organic certification, and it's important to stress, and I've spoken about it before with Matt and Roger, simply because it's incredibly expensive. But because somebody doesn't have organic certification, doesn't mean to say that coffee isn't organic. The money that we've saved from not having organic certification has allowed us to employ a team of staff. It's allowed us to buy more coffee from the community, invest in infrastructure. And whilst we're not opposed to organic certification, we feel that Timor is a country, once people understand it, where people happily support that. Of course, we use fertilizers, and this is primarily from cherry skin, chicken and cow poo mixed up together, which is placed on, actually this is our full-time employee Samal, who works for the Eritoi Cooperative, and this is Kar-Yee getting stuck in. We generally do get our hands dirty. This wasn't just a publicity shot. It's generally placed at the top of the mountain before the wet season starts, and as the rains come, that will carry the fertilizer down to the trees. So this is really how we're trying to work within the environment. I mean, there's not a wealth of information there, but we're trying to do small things well. I mean, I don't know if you've got any questions about that side of our work. Kar-Yee, do you want to?
In a poor country, I don't think so. Anyone would gonna think like they're gonna use chemicals, so really you don't need that. It's normally to use, the cow poo and chicken and whatever, nature. And it's the best actually.
Yeah. You clearly know already. Is that because of your experience in coffee, or?
Not in coffee. Let's say my grandfathers, they was like in the countryside, and they did everything the same, like nature. By cow poo, that one, and it's more healthy for the planet, for
Yeah.
no chemicals.
Yeah.
And the taste of the fruits after, indeed, you can feel, the difference. Indeed, they're not gonna grow, like when you use the chemicals, right? But more tasty.
Yeah. Where's your grandfather from? Where?
I'm from Transylvania, and my grandfathers are like more in south. Is another area, is Moldavia.
Yeah, amazing. And you can taste it. You can.
I'm immigrant.
We all are. That's the beautiful thing about this country. We all are. And that's why I'm proud to be British, because we all are immigrants in some way, shape, or form. But coupled with that, with the animist beliefs, and at the moment, at least, the idea of putting any chemical fertilizer is just why would we do that? Because this is where we get our food from. Yeah, I mean, let's hope as development goes like this, that these cultural beliefs they hang on to. Kar-Yee, do you want to carry on with?
Yeah, so just a little kind of backstory about how we began and what we've been working on since we've been based out in Timor. So we started around 6 years ago now, and we first began by just kind of meeting with some farmers up in the mountains and sitting down and having a chat with them and talking about what sort of opportunities they have with their coffee. So at that time in particular, you can see, well, the guy there in the photo at the bottom in the middle, that is Francisco de Deus, which is one of the first farmers that we met when we went into the mountains to visit and speak with the farmers. So he is a coffee farmer with generations of family that were previously working in coffee as well. So he's kind of grown up around coffee, and that's all he's really kind of known. So he was talking with us and saying how, you know, they were very limited in what sort of opportunities they had with their coffee. So the only opportunity for them at that time to sell their coffee was to sell it in cherry form, but just to a local company that would come around and buy anything. So they were just focused on volume and not quality. So it was more a commodity buyer. But at that time, they were buying cherry at maybe 32 cents per kilo, which compared to what we were prepared to pay for the coffee as well was way below what we were looking at. So what we did was we talked with them and looked into what opportunities there might be for us to be able to set up with them. So initially what we did was we brought back some samples into the UK and sent them to some coffee professionals who just cupped the coffee and tried it and kind of just gave us their honest feedback. And at that time they were like, yeah, the coffee's good. It's good, but it's not amazing yet. There is definitely potential. So what we did then was we went back, and this is what we set up, is our first processing facility. So you can see this is also together with Francisco. This is the Rotutu cooperative that we work with. So you can see here, this is our processing facility that we built, as well as a storage warehouse. So we set that up in able to have a centralized place where the farmers in the group could bring their cherry, and then it could be processed centralized, and it could all be kind of monitored and controlled to ensure that there was consistency and that quality would be up there.
Can I just add something to that, Kai? 6 kilos of cherry will make up 1 kilo of green bean that we sell to you, or you buy from us, just to put that into some sort of relatable figure there. This gentleman here is so all this came about because my friend here was a colleague from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is Francisco's nephew, and we were invited to go there in 2017. He's now junior secretary in Singapore for the Timorese government, and everybody that you'll meet in the city will have some connection to coffee in some way, shape or form. Sorry.
Okay, so after we built the processing facility, the next most important step was to be able to provide some sort of capacity building, education and training to that. So what we did was we brought together all the farmers within the group, and we're not teaching them how to process coffee. These guys already know how to process coffee, and amazing coffee already, but it was just how to lift it that little bit so that within the UK specialty market there was a better opportunity for that coffee. So we did a lot of trainings where we're just focused on, you know, changing little things to be able to make a big difference in the way the coffee cups at the end, I guess. Ultimately, the trees are important. So of course the cherries that you're picking off the trees are important. So the selective picking was the place to start, and then from there is all part of the processing in the coffee. So you will find that in Timor, generally all of the farmers, they will process fully washed coffee as the method of processing. And so what we did was just work together with them and give them extra materials and provide them in different trainings to look at fermentation times, even, you know, lifting the coffee off the floor and using these kind of drying beds to dry the parchment on as well would make a big difference in terms of that quality. And ultimately, coffee is part of Timorese culture, but the way that they drink coffee is very different to the way that you or I would drink coffee. So normally for a Timorese person, they will roast their own coffee beans, but on an open fire, on a skillet, roast it for about an hour until it's as black as my jeans sort of thing. And then they will grind that up, brew it, and then add like 10 spoons of sugar to it, because obviously, you know, it's pretty bitter. So in order to make it palatable, they will add lots and lots of sugar. So we also would run these kind of cupping sessions as well, just to kind of introduce the farmers into how within the Western world, I guess, coffee is drunk. And so we will always bring back coffee with us into Timor. So whether that's coffee from other origins so that they can try that too, but also their own coffee that roasters like Matt and Roger have roasted expertly, and then they will have the opportunity to try their own coffee, but to be able to see how different that actually tastes.
So they was raised actually like for all the generation to do it, you know, 1 hour and make it black.
Yeah.
After you show them like if you roast less and do the coffee, have
Yeah.
a better taste, what they said.
Good question.
Yeah.
All the generations, they know, look, 1 hour,
Yeah.
strong and 10 spoon of sugar.
Yeah, yeah.
After you show them, you know, the other way. What was
Um,
the first impression or?
Varied. Some would look at the beans and then they'd be like, that's not even roasted yet. They're like, how are you going to brew coffee from that? Because that's not even roasted. So yeah, when they were trying it, some of them were very apprehensive about trying it without sugar in the first place. So we're just like, just try it. And, you know, if you don't like it, then feel free to add sugar. So some of the farmers were like, oh, actually, yeah, it's quite nice and I don't need to add sugar. Others, maybe they'll be like, no, I'm much rather in my, you know, dark and sugar.
Because if it's not dark and you go like in a medium roast, let's say, you can feel like a flavor. But being dark is just a bitter taste.
Yes.
Nothing more.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes I guess maybe farmers who are slightly older, who have just, you know, that's their entire life of drinking coffee that way. Changing it is, yeah, can't teach a dog new tricks, right? So yeah, it was a little bit, sometimes there were times where it was like, no, I don't like it, so I'm just going to go back to what I'm used to. But I think slowly now, all of the farmers that we work with, no. So there's actually,
But that's a
surprisingly,
good idea.
yeah, not a lot of people in Timor drink milk, and especially not in their coffee. So if they have milk in their coffee, it's they drink it with condensed milk, and then it's sweet already, and then they'll add more sugar. So that's the only time that I've ever seen anyone have coffee with milk in it.
Yeah, it's it's going to be generational. It will definitely take time.
Yeah.
I think what's
Would be better like to flat the milk first.
Yeah.
Just the milk. You're gonna see probably they're gonna be a bit impressed probably.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how, well, unless we got a battery operated milk frother, it might be a little bit difficult to froth them.
You can make a frappuccino with gas.
Oh, true. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a really sweet story actually, because one of our partner roasters' wife, we brought them back 250 grams of their coffee that had been roasted by a specialty roaster. She tried it and she didn't say anything, but a week later she came back with 5 kilos of the blackest coffee I'd ever seen, and she went,
Proper roast.
give this to your roastery and have them drink proper coffee.
Yeah. She said, this is my present to them. Tell them this is like proper Timorese coffee.
But it was very, very sweet. I think what our partner farmers really appreciate, and what we did with Roger and Matt, we had a video call where we translated, and you got to meet Carlos from Hatuhei. And I think the pride they had that someone outside of Timor was paying an interest in their coffee and knew that, you know, they knew that, oh, so you're the people that bought our coffee and are roasting it. I think that that relationship for them was like, oh yeah, it's that sense of pride you get, right, from that. Because prior to that, what would happen? The commercial buyers would buy the coffee and drive it over the border into Indonesia, and it would be sold to a big buyer. So the fact that now their coffee's being sold as Timorese coffee,
They're saying to that company like they're paying more for me, or
that no, maybe, well, I will show you later the pricing. So the big company would pay probably about 30% less than we do.
they choose like to go with
Volume.
everything and
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was no other option. Which is one of the fundamental reason of why we set this up, was how to try and get a better price. Knowing full well that specialty coffee, the markup is so big. Our belief is everybody can win here. We can hopefully get a slice. The farmers' price will go up. The roaster will support what we're trying to do, which is what Matt and Roger have done, and we're so grateful for. But ultimately, it's about who's going to drink it at the end of the day. And you're a specialty coffee buyer, right? So thank you. Keep on supporting Matt and Roger. So just I suppose on a day-to-day basis, this is what we do. So
Yeah,
just a short video.
Just a little video about how coffee is processed, but there is it's just music on this one, so it's fine.
Just press pause for a sec. So that last part is called a piñera. All you do, we want to make sure that the beans are as big as possible. So after they've harvested, they need to sieve them, and that just takes away any of the smaller cherries.
Yeah, so this is the fully washed process of processing coffee, method of processing coffee even. So there are different processes, of course, naturals, honeys, carbonic macerations, and all sorts of new kind of technical ways of processing, but this is just the fully washed method.
And this is our processing facility. Just press pause a sec, Key.
they're going fast.
Yeah.
Motivated.
They drink a lot of strong coffee, right?
Floating. Any idea why we might need to float the cherry?
Sunration between the sort of unripe or poor.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
idea with eggs. Eat fresh eggs.
Ah, yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So anything that's floating, insect damage, and will be lighter. So we'll float to the surface, and we need to get that out.
This is pulping.
And just removing the flesh from the fruit. Again, all floating. Need to get rid of it.
So again,
Dulled.
sorry. The beans that are floating on the top are defects, damaged of some way of sort, so it kind of floats down with the water, and we can collect that and separate it.
And from here, just press pause here, please. Okay, so this is the fermentation process. So lots of different fermentation processes. What we do with our fully washed coffees is, it's called anaerobic fermentation. It's going in with this called the baldy, which is essentially a big bucket, starving of oxygen. And we leave it for about 40 hours to a pH level of 4.3. So the water is very, very high in acid. And it's here that you'll start to get the enzymes forming that will give the flavor profile for the coffee. And the sweet spot is generally between 3.9 to 4.2 pH. We've got a little pH meter that we use. Our partner farmers don't use the pH meter. They just use the tried old tested method of smelling it, looking at it, touching it, and often they're more correct than the kit that we use. Trust tradition.
Is that something that you can manipulate?
Good question.
To sort of like change the flavour profile on coffees?
Yeah, so there are different ways of fermentation. So this is an anaerobic, obviously wet submerged fermentation. There is aerobic fermentation where you can just put it into a sack. There are methods of carbonic maceration, which is where you put it into a pressurized container and flush it with oxygen. And then that will actually not oxygen, carbon dioxide. And that creates a pressurized environment, which I guess in essence is forcing the flavor enzymes into the cherries or into the beans, to create a different type of fermentation. There's all sorts of new methods now. Koji, for example, adding a yeast into it, or a mold, something like that, to change the kind, or not change necessarily, but add that extra into it. There's also apparently there is also a salt fermentation, which seems kind of like counterintuitive to add salt to something that's supposedly supposed to be sweet, but apparently the salt kind of enhances the sweetness of it as well. So yeah, there's a whole, it's a big rabbit hole of.
Have you got other coffees? I mean, how many coffees have you got on offer now? 8 or 9? And are there any out there fermentation types that you've got?
So we've got the double fermented, which is the Colombian. We've got the natural, which I suppose is, I mean, that always sort of slightly ferments when you actually process stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really just the Colombian, the double fermented.
Okay.
But weirdly, not what I'd expect from a double fermented. If someone didn't tell me, I'd probably expect it to be a washed.
Okay.
It doesn't really taste. It has a bit of sort of that sweet sort of like fruitiness to it, like you'd expect from something fermented, but not anywhere near as strong as what most fermented coffees give you.
Yeah, I've gotten into a habit of tasting fermentation water when we visit, because it's I mean, partner farmers think I'm stupid, for want of a better word, but you get a real good indicator of flavour, and quite often with the water here, it will be like a mango fruit, very acidic wine that you're trying. But that your question about are people experimenting with that? We once saw a fellow coffee colleague in Timor who was in the supermarket, and he had a trolley. There's a couple of supermarkets in the city, and they had a trolley full of red wine. I'm like, what are you doing? Are you having a party? And he's like, well, no, we're going to try some red wine fermentation. I don't think it worked out well. But yeah, and I think the debate there is, how's that changing the natural flavour of the coffee? And I mean, our opinion is that, okay, if the public want it, then yeah, why not? But it's definitely manipulating flavour. We're just about getting this one process right. But for the future, because I suppose roasters want to offer a different menu to your customers.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar in that when we choose how we're going to roast something, we try and figure out the best way, or the way of roasting it that best sort of amplifies the flavour, or as far as our palates are concerned, best shows off the flavour of what we get from you guys. And I presume it'd be similar from what you decide to do in a processing format, is you kind of, I guess you'd end up choosing, I mean, you need something that's easily implementable for the farmers, but obviously something that will kind of best show off the flavours that are available, which I presume will depend on, what's on the soil and what this kind of core flavour is.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there, Matt, and that is what's best for the farmers, because it's what they're comfortable doing, and you don't want to change centuries of tradition, right? So that we're very mindful of that. Do you want to crack on and?
It's just no,
sorry.
sorry.
Can you take it forward?
Hang on, let me try and see if I can. Here you go.
Yeah, so after it's been fermented, one thing we haven't touched on here is this water is incredibly harmful to the environment. It will kill off all other vegetation if you put it directly on. So what you can't see here is a a channel where the water will run off into just some filtration system of rocks to take care of that. The drying the coffee ordinarily should take about 7 to 10 days. Last year, because of climate change, we're moving into 10 to 15 days. If you control it right, no, it won't affect quality, but you've got to control it. So that's coffee processing on that point. I don't know if there's any questions there. You probably knew that already, how that all works. Move on.
Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Do you want to just touch on that?
So currently we now work with 7 different groups, all dotted around the Leti-Foho region. So we began with Rotutu, and that is where our centralized processing facility is. And from there, what we do is we've reached out to new groups within the surrounding area, but all those groups are interconnected and they all share and educate each other. So it's not just each individual group is focused on themselves. They are all kind of very closely connected and will reach out to each other for help or to share experiences, and we actively promote that. And we like to have the opportunity where the farmers will all come together and they can just talk. Because, you know, we don't want to be the ones dictating what they're doing or anything like that. It's all about how coffee is developing and growing for them, and how small changes or ideas that one farmer might have can share that then his experience or her experience with other farmers to see if they, you know, if they have the same kind of outcomes or experiences, or whether they think that there are different ways of doing something in a better way. So we will always encourage all of our farmers to actively reach out to each other. And actually, you will find that a lot of our farmers, they all have the same surname. So a large majority of our farmers are all the Deuses, which is pretty much son or daughter of God, I guess. So they are all connected in the sense that they're all family as well. So yeah, as we say, they're from generations of coffee farmers, so it's natural for them to come together and be able to share their experiences and their knowledge in that way.
And if we start a new group, it's on a recommendation based from an existing group. That's how it will work. It will be a group. So last year, 2021, Matt and Roger bought from the Hatuhei group here, and so from the 2022 harvest, Matt and Roger have supported this group here, Remagoa. Actually, you're supporting because they work together. It's internal support for all of the groups. That's what it is. But Remagoa, it's our first year working with these guys. They were a subgroup of this group here, Taurema. So I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, we got this. Right. So I suppose that's the part about the coffee forests and agroforestry. That's our sustainability from an environmental perspective. Clearly that was about people and the social aspect. This is the economic aspect, and really this is just what we've done here regarding our pricing. So just to understand this, broadly speaking, this is the price to the farmer year on year, which has gone up if they sell cherry. Remember, 6 kilos of cherry for 1 kilo of green bean. Parchment is when you've that little video that we watched, at the end of it you saw what looked like a white, well, it's called parchment because it's got a paper cover over the bean. 1.3 kilos of parchment makes up 1 kilo of green bean, so that's the kilo price. As you can see, that's gone up as well. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but it's public information on our website anyway. And when we work with our partner roasters, we want people to know that this is what we sell it for, which is where am I looking? Here. So as you can see, we've had steady increments. Our price has gone up quite a lot this year, more than we'd have liked to. It's gone up 16%, and the reason for that is the cost of our freight. As you can see, year one to ship a container from Timor was $2,500. Last year, 9,850. That's a big cost for us. So we have reduced our margin, our gross margin, and we're lucky that Roger and Matt have continued to support us. And I don't know if you've put your prices up with your partner cafes and your customers, but yeah, a lot of it comes down to freight. But I suppose what's going on in the background here is a commercial price that is just either going like this or going like this, and isn't sustainable. That isn't offering sustainability for our partner farmers. And I think we're worried that unless you have that, unless you can see that there's some reason to continue getting up and working hard and seeing your efforts being rewarded, then your children aren't going to want to continue working in agriculture. Or even, worst case scenario, you start ripping up your crops and planting something else. Which we don't want to happen. So that's our pricing there. I mean, does anyone, do you want to comment on that at all? Or if there's any questions from a...
I guess from when we started, the whole idea is, again, around sustainability and making it a sustainable way for the farmers to make a consistent income year on year. So not only is that through being able to process the coffee and being able to bring it to market, but in terms of our commitment in making it sustainable for them to earn a good income from that coffee that they are processing. So our commitment to them was that we would offer one of the highest prices, if not the highest price, for coffee being purchased in Timor. So we buy based on two different models, so it depends on which group basically. So we may purchase cherry, so through Rotutu, where we have our centralized processing facility, then we will purchase cherry from the farmers. And then for the other groups, we purchase their parchment, which means that the farmers themselves, they process the coffee themselves, but we've obviously kind of given them that training in terms of the ideal, well, not the ideal, but the recommended method of doing that. But we will ultimately always be there on hand to support. So we will visit regularly on a weekly basis every individual farmer, just to make sure in terms of quality control and assisting with them if they have any problems at the time, then we will always be on hand. So our price has continued to increase year on year, and that is part of our commitment with them. So our price will never drop down. So either we will always maintain or increase our price. And of course, just paying a high price doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get quality. But we're building a long-term partnership here with our farmers, and they know that, and they can see that, and they're on board with that. So, if there are occasions where we're not necessarily the highest price in the market, it might just be a 1 year one-off. The following year, it may well be that we will actually be the highest price the following year. So it's kind of the long-term game with the farmers, a long-term kind of partnership that we're building here.
Which is what happened last year. So the backdrop of this here in the commercial market, because of, well, probably fuel crisis, is that you saw this cost here in Timor would be 32 cents, whilst that's flatlined. And then our price is set at the beginning of the harvest. We sit down and we agree on that price. What you saw in Timor, it started off at about 36 cents. And then because of climate change, there were lower yields, higher costs in Timor with other products. What you start to see was a battle from commercial companies pushing this price up during the harvest up to a similar price that we were paying. But what they weren't doing was encouraging good harvest practice, which is selective picking of red cherries. They were just buying anything on the side of the road, sticks in, rocks in, strip pickings when you start to damage the trees with less consideration to quality. We're very lucky. We only work with 104 farmers, so that's quite easy to manage. But what will probably happen next year is that will fall off a cliff.
With the freight, because actually the price is almost double.
Good question. We'd like an answer to that from our freight company, but yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the shipping agents. So whatever they decide to charge is whatever you have to pay. And unfortunately, out of Timor, there is only really one option for shipping out of Timor into Europe, into the UK. But also, of course, you know, we started obviously in 2019, 2020, COVID, 2021, COVID. And during this time, there was a shortage in containers and shortage in terms of shipping lines that were going from place to place as well, which meant that ultimately there was high demand but less supply, and therefore prices shot up, and they just haven't come down yet. I mean, from 2022, there's also the war in Ukraine. Fingers crossed, we hope so, because we can't. Yeah, exactly.
25 and 98.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you consider actually, I mean, for coffee as well, we have to ship a full container, whatever we ship. So because coffee can't really be mixed in with other things because it's highly absorbent of other smells and, you know, around. So we have to use a full container just ourselves. So actually one 20-foot container holds 18 tons of coffee. So we are still not at that full container yet. So if we're paying, you know, nearly $10,000 for a container that's half full, as opposed to being full as well, that makes that ultimately a lot more expensive for us as well.
So that's our quantity here. Year 1, close to 5 tons. Year 2, close to 6. Year 3, close to 10. And last year, around just over 10.5. But we're okay with that. We're slowly, we find, well, I'm sure it's in any developing country, the faster you go, the more mistakes you're going to make. So we have to do it very slowly. We'd have liked a little bit more quantity last year, but yeah, we didn't get it. But most other companies found they couldn't hit their target, so we're happy that we.
That's why probably you got, you know, at the end with 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be a bit fair.
And that affects it, yeah.
And ultimately for us, the most important thing for our coffee is that the quality is there. So we will not jeopardize the quality of the coffee over the quantity.
People are still there and doing, you know, this one, so the business will gonna.
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully. I mean, other people come to us and say, well, if you've got room in your container, buy this coffee or buy that coffee. And it's like, no, we only buy coffee from people with established relationships and just buy willy-nilly because we have to be able to explain the story to our customers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the unique thing about us, I guess, is that we are both the exporter out of Timor-Leste and the importer into the UK. So that supply chain of coffee actually goes from the farmer to us to the roaster. So that is kind of one of the most direct routes that you can get the coffee into the market. Whereas maybe there are other importers of coffee into the UK who work through an exporter, who works through a cooperative, who works through a wet mill, who works with the farmer. So every step of that supply chain obviously has an added margin in that price. So before it's even gotten into the UK, you don't know how many hands it's gone through to be able to get to that point. And so I guess for us, that means that obviously we can offer the best price we can to the farmer, and without having to add on huge margins, as you can see, to be able to then get that to the roaster as well. And we, because we are based out at origin, we live in the mountains, we work with the farmers together, we can confidently tell you every single step of the process of the coffee, and we can pretty much guarantee that we have had a part in that coffee since it was picked off the tree. So we've picked cherries off trees. We've sorted cherries to make sure that you're floating and picking out, doing the piñera, sieving the cherries so that you are only processing the best quality of cherries. We've fermented. We've definitely washed coffee, which is not easy, and all the drying and the hand sorting. Even we've been on hand for every single step of the way.
You have already a few years, so you just opened the business, let's say in 2019,
Mm.
kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you say a container, it would be like 18 tons, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have enough farmers or something, like how you can see your business like is improving every year.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have enough, like green beans, like to provide, like let's say for UK.
Yeah.
like, in the
So
future.
Hopefully,
we hope so.
if we stay optimistic like you, then yes.
Like the farmers, they can
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
produce, a lot more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the thing is that I guess because we are involved in every step of the way and we're very conscious of the quality of the coffee, then we know that actually with all the farmers that we work with, they have the potential to be able to process enough coffee to be able to get to a full container. But because we won't jeopardize quality, there are other factors that are involved, whether that's climate change that makes drying difficult, and there are times where maybe we can't buy all of the coffee because it's not necessarily to the standard of quality that we need to be able to access the specialty market. And so then it's a case of assisting the farmer to find another option as well for those coffees that we don't take on, but then it could be an opportunity for someone who is in a more commodity buying position, so they don't lose out. And we don't say to our farmers necessarily that you can only sell your coffee to us. If they wanted to sell to somebody else, then they can. But considering the long-term partnership that we are building here and the kind of, not just in terms of monetary terms of investment, but also, the time, the materials that we're investing in, it's a relationship. And, we're not just a buyer that comes in for 2 weeks and then purchases the coffee and leaves. We're there, we're working with the farmers and we're processing together. And a lot of the farmers refer to us as their family now. So, it's not that we only know the farmer themselves. So we might know his wife or her husband, and then we know all of their kids. We've been to their weddings, so we're very connected
Sorry,
with them.
you're like from that region originally, or you're from
No,
that region?
no. So I am from the UK. So I was born in the UK.
Because I'm thinking you know that language, no?
I speak the language, but only because I've learnt it since I've been there. So I'm not from Timor. My parents are originally from Hong Kong.
I'm thinking probably if your name was like that, daughter of God or something, was better.
Maybe I should change my name. I think since we went to Timor, and I guess once we started considering about setting up a business in coffee, the most important thing is to be able to communicate with our farmers, because they don't speak English and we can't expect them to be able to speak English either. So it was ultimately down to us to be able to either find a translator who could work with us all the time or learn the language. So, we learned the language. And it's not that difficult to learn.
It's not if you're a polyglot who can already speak 4 languages, but it took me a lot longer than it took you. But it's there's no verb conjugation. It's quite a straightforward language. I have to say, I think things regarding relationships in the community, things got remarkably easier once we started to go to mass on a Sunday. Yeah, I think remembering the culture that you're in and respecting that culture wherever you are in the world is something that we're like, yeah, need very mindful, because it's a cultural line that you have to walk carefully when you're in any country, all right?
It's about the respect for us.
Respect for yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and hopefully this will continue to go up. I'd like to think if the freight came down, this price would come down.
The last one wouldn't go, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe, but you know.
I think, do you wanna- so thank you for being patient with us, by the way. We're just a few things to finish off with. I mean, challenges going forward. So what happened in 1975 when Indonesia came in? You had the fight against the Indonesians. Most of our coffee farmers are veterans, so they fought against Indonesia and they went into the coffee forests to hide, to organise themselves and to fight against the Indonesians. And what happened in that time, there was just a complete... people forgot about coffee and were fighting for their independence, and there was no rehabilitation of plants. So as you can see here, I mean, a coffee tree should not look like that. Ideally, you'd have it at a nice height where you can pick. And during that time, from 75 to 2002, things just went out of control. You've got 3-meter tall trees, 4-meter tall trees. The sunlight's only coming to the top branches, and you're only getting fruit there. It's not coming down here.
Because you must do training.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we're getting on top of that. The government are helping coffee companies to offer support with that, which we're trying to do at the moment. This is our farmer Manuel. We did some training for this. This is his plot. It takes 3 or 4 years to regenerate, so we can harvest again, which is quite a long time. It seems counterintuitive to cut back your crop and not get a return for 3 or 4 years, which is why the government have stepped in to offer support, which is positive. This is actually a rehabilitated tree after 2 years, so this is looking much more like it should do. So we're trying to combat that with the support of government, I might add. Kar-Yee, next. Climate change.
So I guess out of the 4 years since we've been exporting coffee from Timor, last year's harvest was probably the most challenging, the most difficult, just because mainly of the impact of climate change. So normally in Timor there are 2 seasons. So there's the dry season and the wet season. So the wet season will run from around November until March time, and then the dry season will start. So the harvest, as I said, starts in May, June normally. But last year the rain was still coming in June. And so that causes havoc when you're trying to process coffee, because ultimately the cherries on the trees are going to start absorbing too much water because there's so much rain. So then the quality of that cherry maybe starts to decline quite quickly once you've picked it off the tree. So that was an issue. But then of course then the drying stage of the process was very difficult. So the kind of ambient temperatures at this time, normally during harvest time, you will get good periods of intense sunshine from 8-9 o'clock in the morning until around 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. So during that time is when you have the best opportunity for drying coffee. But last year, because of the rain, the clouds were coming in really early, so maybe coming in even around lunchtime, which meant that we actually had to move the coffee out from outside and bring it under the shelter. So normally, as we said, the farmers will dry on these stationary kind of raised beds, but obviously moving or trying to move coffee when the rain is coming in thick and fast, then you've got to be quick. So we had to think on our feet, or not us think on our feet, but actually it was Francisco here. He was like, why don't we build these portable drying racks instead? So we built these kind of 2-meter by 1-meter drying racks, which meant that we could lay them out on racks when the sun was out, and if we saw that the rain was going to come, you can lift it and move it and place it under the shelter so that it was protected from the rain. But because we made them stackable, it meant that there was still constant ventilation to prevent things like mold and things, and ensure that there was constant circulation around the coffee still. So yeah, I mean, obviously drying normally takes 7 to 10 days for fully wash, but last year we were looking at over 2 weeks as a minimum, which yeah, makes it challenging to try and
And what happens there, we reach out to the other groups, and the lead farmer from each group is invited to come and have a workshop on how to replicate this. We'll help with materials, and then we'll transport the racks to their farms as well. So we ended up giving each household, if someone like Ramagoa, for example, two of these, just to tide them over. But what we need is a bit more transparency with other big export companies who know the industry far better than we do, that can share ideas from what they've learned in other origins, to combat climate change, because it's happening. And in the backdrop of this, what we had no idea was that the UK was at 40 degrees. We're quite cut off with information in Timor. Sometimes we don't have running water in our home. Sometimes we don't have electricity, and we had no idea that it was 40 degrees here. Good weather for drying coffee, ironically. Yeah.
yeah.
I think did we talk about this earlier? I'm not sure if we touched on it earlier. We got an aging workforce, young people. This is Francisco's son from Rotutu. He worked for us for year 1 as a project manager. He wants to go overseas. He wants to work in the city. We support that. But how can we address that? And I think the only thing is the sector needs to offer jobs, well-paid jobs, to work in the industry, which is what we're trying to do at the moment. So this is our full-time employee, Samal. We're trying to pull his son in. He's just finished university. He's come up to work in the mountains with us to use GPS to map the farms and to work out how much land each farmer has, so we can find out more about research there. I think his team was very patriarchal. There's no escaping that. Having Kar-Yee front and centre, me just driving the car because she's got far much more to offer than I have, starts to change dynamics of how women are viewed in Timor, certainly in extreme remote mountain districts. We've not spoken about it much, but when we've got the parchment, we have to take it down to Dili, the city, for it to be what's called dry hold. And that means removing the papery layer, which is done by an incredible team. It's subcontracted for a Japanese company who have a team of hand sorters, 40 women who spend 10 days just going through kilo by kilo, taking out defects. Incredibly hard work. And again, we get stuck in, we help out. But yeah, it is patriarchal, and we do need to address jobs and also the role of females in society there. And we'll just finish off with, so the coffee this year that Matt and Roger have supported us is from a group called Ramagoa. It's our newest group. We were invited to work with these guys from the Tauranga farmers. So just a little 1-minute video to sort of show you them and see the environment that we're buying their coffee from.
There should be a voiceover, but it's obviously not coming through on my computer. So
okay.
Hopefully, I think the subtitles should be covering everything that's said in the background, but yeah. One of our highlights from this year's harvest in Timor-Leste was our new partnership with the coffee farmers from Ramagoa in Letiferro. Because of its remote location and lack of road access, a 2-kilometer hike is needed to get there, although once you arrive, you're welcomed with stunning views and green and luscious landscapes. Steeped in traditional cultural practices which revolve around a deep-rooted respect for ancestry and Mother Nature, all coffee is organically grown and interspersed with other crops under the cooling shade of the Aikakeo trees. Through the investment of time and materials, the farmers from Remogoa have diligently processed a deliciously clean, fully washed coffee with a light body and sweet citrusy notes. So, if you're looking for specialty coffee grown in a stunning location by incredible people who care for their environment, get in touch to find out more about Remogoa and our other coffees from the 2022 harvest in Timor-Leste.
That's it. So prior to us starting to work with our partner farmers here, they would have to carry their cherry to the side of a road and just wait for somebody to come along and buy it off the road. But as you can see, extremely remote. Horseback to get it out of the forest, but diligently processed, much better price for their coffee, and hopefully quite a good story for the roaster to know that's what you're supporting. By supporting us, we can support them. So that's it, and this is just that. Yeah, that's where we live in Himera. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
And being patient.
It's not a big list, you know, we support.
Yeah. And you're very welcome to ask any questions that you may have about anything.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you.